Can you imagine if you like died and got stuck haunting like a McMansion
Or like a CVS.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are worse things. You're right.
You're just like, I hate it. Like just spending eternity
Banality.
hanging out under like fluorescent lights.
Yeah. Oh.
No one would realize you were a ghost. They'd just assume you were a particularly depressed employee. Yeah. Like
Books. 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 Books.
hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that is preying on unfaithful men. I am your host, Grace Todd, and with me today is friend of the pod, Jessica Camilli. You're back. Welcome back. We had you last for some Thomas Hardy sad art boy discourse.
Yes. Some cringy.
Yeah,
And cringy crush discourse.
The cringy crush, and I promised you then that I would have you back to do something that was less housewifey.
Okay. Yes.
And now you're here
Perfect.
for spooky season, for our October marathon of spooky little stories.
It's the best time of the year.
How you doing?
I am hanging on. This is my favorite time of the year, but the busiest time of the year for me. And every day is scary.
My planner was the real ghost story.
Yes, that is the exact existence I am living through. But
What are your favorite spooky season narratives? What do you treat yourself with fiction wise?
Ooh, I want to say something like beautiful and something that makes me sound really smart, but I really am just like rewatching Buffy and, like Silence of the Lambs. And like I said, Jennifer's Body last night at the Bird.
Ah, great.
A lot of Rocky Horror and stuff.
Spooky season can be a time for exploration and for trying new horror narratives. Yeah. But especially if you are overwrought, it's a great time to just kind of like revisit the classics.
I love true horror, but my heart really lies with like the campy, fun horror.
I do love a horror comedy.
Like the new like Maxine and that. Have you watched any of those? The X and Pearl and.
No, not yet.
They're great. They're not really scary. They're like slasher, funny, awesome.
I'm glad we're leaning back into slashers. Like,
oh yeah,
it's a good time in the world.
I think we need it. the giant hurricanes with tornadoes and stuff. We're like, you know what? Just give us some corny, bloody.
Yeah, I think for the what I'm calling the unprecedented generation, which is everyone millennials and younger, I'm lumping us all in together. There's something very comfortingly precedented by like man chases you with knife.
Yes.
As opposed to like existential dread.
Right.
And climate change.
Yeah.
You're like, this is very straightforward. I can wrap my head around it.
Feels oddly safe.
Yeah. You're like, this is a concrete solvable problem.
Yes, exactly.
A man has a knife and he is chasing me.
Yes. Dark. That is comfort in these times.
Well,
moving on.
Anyway.
Can't get to that subject line.
Well, speaking of...
So what do we got today? Light, fun, knife chasey horror or existential dread?
I don't think it's an existential dread quite.
Okay.
So I've brought you a short story from 1919 by a woman named Alicia Ramsey called A Modern Circe.
Have you read Circe by Madeline Miller?
I have.
Okay.
And
Excited.
I love it very much.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
And I unfortunately could not find out a ton about Alicia herself. She wrote short stories. She wrote a couple of novels. Most of her work is very hard to track down. And she actually pivoted not long after writing this story into writing early films.
Oh, cool.
In like the 20s. But most of them have been lost.
Right.
Unfortunately. So
it was hard to copy film back then.
Yeah, it was. And so she's a little bit of an enigma.
Cool.
And so we're not going to talk much about her. We're going to have to just take her at her word.
We're here for her art.
We're here for the story.
Cool.
So here we go into A Modern Circe. It happened in a little country village in the south of Italy. I know it's true because I was there when it happened. I had been ill and was spending the winter there to try and regain my health. The first day I was there, I noticed him. He was the kind of person you couldn't help noticing if you tried. He was tall and broad, with a magnificent pair of dark eyes and a mop of thick black curls. With his red shirt and his white teeth and his swaggering walk, he was like one of Franz Hall's roistering cavaliers stepped out of its gold frame and come to life. My little maid, who used to bring me my coffee, told me about him. He was a stonemason by trade, but, like his father before him, he had run away to sea. When his father died, he had come back. He had sold his father's vineyard. His name was Ferdinando. All women loved him, and his wicked ways had broken his poor old mother's heart. Not the only heart he had broken, I gathered. So our narrator, she's staying in a little town in southern Italy, and she meets Ferdinando, who is the town
hottie.
He's the town hottie. He's the town heartbreaker. And so everyone is in love with Ferdinando, including our narrator a little bit. Like, she's charmed by him.
Sure.
She's not actually being sucked in, but she's definitely charmed by him.
She's like pretending to be above it.
Yes.
But, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then her maid, the maid that she has engaged while she's staying there, Margarita, is head over heels in love with Fernando. Fernando, he's been places. He
went out to sea.
He did. He's a traveler. And it says that he shares with our narrator a passion for strange, out-of-the-way things. Many and many a queer story he told me of lawless loves and fierce hates and undying feuds. But never a queerer one than the one which he himself lived while I was with him. So,
we got a little Casanova.
We've got some Casanova action. And she and Fernando, he's become her tour guide, essentially, while she's there. Ferdinando loves to brag. He loves to show off. And they're coming back from a trip into the hills one afternoon. And he's telling her about all of the different women he has made love to.
Oh.
Whether or not he's actually had sex with them, very unclear. This was written in 1919.
So they're not explicit in the book because of the time it was written.
We don't know. He might be like making love to them in sort of the Victorian sense of the word, which is just held her hand. Courting them.
Yes.
But he also might be having sex with them. Unclear. But he concludes by telling her about his affair with Margarita the maid. And he says, "A dove with silver feet is little Margarita, the voice of a nightingale which has pierced the heart of a white rose. The worn beads round her white throat are not more pure than her soul. The kisses of her lips behind the door are sweeter than Apennine honey." And he goes on to say, "When the old witch, her grandmother, is dead, and I have made yet one more journey, I will return and marry the little Margarita. She will have 5 cows and 10 pigs, and she can take in the stranger's washing. I, Ferdinando, will lie in the sun and tell my rosary for the dear women who have loved me. And when my turn comes to die, the prayers of the little Margarita will ascend to heaven, and the good God will forgive me my transgressions for the sake of my tender and faithful wife."
So his attraction to her is in what he thinks of as a way to get into heaven. He's like, if I get this pious, perfect woman, it'll even out all my sinning.
Yes.
Okay.
And I also think there's like, I feel like we see this dynamic now too with dudes who are like, these women over here are like fun for now.
Right.
But eventually when I decide that I've worn out my welcome in that part of the culture, I'm going to go find some little mousy Christian.
Oh, yeah. Nothing has changed. It's the whole, what do the youth say? The body count thing where it's like, so you want her to have slept with like 3 guys, but then you want to sleep with lots of women. So who are the women you're sleeping with?
Yes.
Yeah. It's okay.
Margarita is like his retirement plan.
Oh, God. So terrible. 100 years later, nothing has changed.
And our narrator is like, why do you have to wait for her grandmother to die to marry her? And he points out that even though he was a disappointment to his father, that his father would arise from his tomb if his Ferdinando married a girl without a suitable dowry.
Oh.
Because, patriarchal pride, right?
Sure.
And also, what a deal for Margarita.
Wait, so he thinks the grandma...
Once the grandma dies...
She will receive her inheritance and then she'll have a dowry?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And he's too good, Ferdinando. Despite having been a disappointment to everyone in his life, he is still too good and too important to marry a woman who doesn't have a suitable dowry.
Yes, beneath his status.
Despite being a fail son.
So we love this character.
He's the best. We love him so much. And it says, I don't know whether it was the buoyant air or Ferdinando's dark eyes, luminous as the stars, profound as night, looking up at me out of the twilight. Perhaps I'd fallen a victim to the handsome vagabond, too. But the fancy seized me to play the god in the machine to the little Margarita. As delicately as I could, I asked the breaker of hearts to name his price.
Ooh.
And he immediately says, 100 pounds.
Jeez.
And it says, his eyes betrayed him. Not much stars or night about them at that moment. Nothing but sheer greed. And our narrator says that she will give Margarita 50 pounds
Towards her dowry.
The day that Ferdinando marries her. And he immediately, he sweeps a grand bow and says, Signora, in the name of that dead saint, my father, and the old witch, her grandmother, I invite you to grace with your presence the betrothal party of the gallant Ferdinando and the little Margarita tonight. He's very dramatic, right? He starts beating himself on the chest and swearing to the heavens that he's going to be the best husband that ever has been.
I forget this is a podcast. I'm just here grimacing because I hate him. Okay, continue. What does he say?
Well, isn't this such a nice love story for Margarita? Don't you just...
I foresee good things for Margarita.
And he's swearing to heaven that he's going to lead the blameless life of an honorable citizen, a faithful husband, and a good father, a shining example to all of his fellow men. And he says, the blessed Madonna be my witness. I have done with women from this hour.
Oh, yeah, that always works.
Mm-hmm. And he kisses his little crucifix. Yeah. But then, as he kisses the necklace, it says, the sound of a woman's laughter filled the air. Soft yet penetrating, gay yet full of suggestion, pregnant with 1,000 strange emotions. I had never heard such laughter. Woman as I am, it thrilled me through and through. I could see it affected Ferdinando no less than it did me. His face went white under his sunburn. His black eyes, cunning no longer, widened and deepened with an extraordinary apprehension. It is the Mad Virgin of the Hills.
Ooh, we get local lore.
Uh-huh.
Fun.
And she's like, who is the Mad Virgin of the Hills, Ferdinando? And we find out that there's this local myth. He calls her the Great Heartbreaker. She lives in the solitary places. She has a dog who is an evil spirit. Those who hear her laugh are the ones she chooses. She lures them to her, and they love her, and she turns them into dogs.
Oh my god, I love her. Great, finally a character I can love.
And our narrator calls her a modern Circe.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yes.
She turns the men into pigs.
And then she appears.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. On the slope of the hill, where the ground was broken into a little plateau, sat a woman on a stone. She had a staff in her hand, crowned with scarlet roses, and a wreath of scarlet roses in her red gold hair. A bright blue veil, powdered with little gold stars, was wrapped around her shoulders and half concealed her face. At her feet, in a semicircle around her, lay 6 huge dogs.
Nice. She's doing a service to the town.
So the Mad Virgin of the Hills appears, and she comes towards them. The dogs all follow her and then sit around her. As she comes up, she pulls her veil back, and it says, I gasped as I caught sight of her. So fair, so scornful, so weary, so white, with a mouth of blood and eyes like blue flames. I thrilled to her face as I had to her laughter. Behind me, I heard Ferdinando catch his breath like a sob.
Yay, is there going to be some gayness in here too?
I don't know.
Okay.
This is
am I projecting my own desires?
I don't think you are. It is emphatic and repeated enough that when I was reading it, I was like, do we have a crush?
Okay.
But again, I know nothing about Alicia Ramsey.
Sure.
All we have to go on is the text.
I'm going to read it that way.
That's good. I support you in that.
Okay, cool.
And so she approaches, and it says that she's backed by the setting sun, and so the roses are backlit and glowing.
Wow.
And she walks up to Ferdinando and says, "Oh ho! So it's you, breaker of hearts, is it?" Her voice was another surprise. Clear and low-pitched, one of those voices that irresistibly arrest the ear. "Why don't you come and break mine?"
Ooh. So good.
Ferdinando loses his voice. He just freezes like a little bunny. And she laughs again and walks away. And Ferdinando is like, "Dio mio, I am a lost man. I am doomed."
Wow. Because he knows he can't resist her?
Because apparently, if you hear her laughing,
Oh, okay.
you belong to her
That's
now.
the lore. Cool.
Like, he's
Yeah.
a marked man.
He's been ensnared.
She's not taking him away right now,
Right.
but he knows that he is.
Yeah. Love it.
Yep.
Great.
And despite his certainty, our narrator is like, "You don't actually think that the Mad Woods lady is going to steal you, do you?"
Our narrator is our Scully.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. She's not buying it. And they go back to the village and announce that Margarita's dowry has been paid.
Wait. He settled for half of what he wanted for the dowry. Okay, I missed that.
Yeah.
That's,
So he
okay.
Yeah, that's it. He didn't even need the full 100. He settled for 50.
Wow.
A shrewd bargain.
Jeez.
So they get back to town. They tell Margarita and her grandmother about seeing the mad version of the hills. And they talk to the priest, too. And everyone is like, "Oh, he's doomed."
It is Italy. That's understandable.
We're going to get some like grade A early 1900s intra-European racism, by the way.
I can say that I'm Italian.
I did not do this on purpose. I was halfway through doing all of my underlining and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, she is Italian."
Yeah, it's cool.
So I'm here to slander your people.
I love it.
Well,
especially the men. It's great.
Alicia Ramsey is here to slander your people.
So far, Fernando does strike me as the average Italian male, so...
So everyone is very upset, but our narrator says, "No man's lost who has 100 pounds." She doubles the dowry on the spot.
It's interesting that he's not interested in her if she has all this money.
I think he knows.
Okay.
Right? She's a rich English?
Question mark?
Question mark? Rich English lady.
Okay.
He's like, she's not gonna.
Yeah.
We might be able to have a fling. It feels like they had a fling.
There's some tension, yeah.
It feels like they had a fling.
The beginning, it makes them sound like the fact that he's like talking about his conquest and stuff, they at least have a friendship. There's like intimacy there.
At a minimum, they're definitely broing down.
Cool. It sounds like that.
Yeah.
All right. And they're both into the hot witch lady, which is fun.
Everyone, yes, exactly.
Cool.
She's just canonically a lesbian.
I love it.
That's what I'm going with here, because she and Ferdinando are clearly like, what we're not hearing is her half of the narrative where she's telling Ferdinando about all of the women she seduced.
Cool.
You know?
Yes.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
That
this
works.
is the story I'm listening to.
But it says, "The Italian peasant has yet to be born who can resist money."
Oh, okay. We went straight to the racism.
And so, as upset as Fernando is about the fact that he's been marked for doom by the mad virgin of the hills, he and Margarita get distracted, dithering with each other about how they're going to spend their windfall
Love.
and planning their engagement party.
It's so funny how quick humans in the face of danger or bad things can just so quickly go to what they're comfortable and used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lady who wants to turn me into a dog, but we're getting married.
Well, a lady wants to turn me into a dog, but look at all this money I just got.
Look what we can buy.
And all I had to do was marry Margarita.
Wow.
Again, what a deal for Margarita.
For real.
She
gets money and a hot guy.
And so our narrator goes and checks in with the priest to be like, what? And to her surprise, the priest takes this very seriously. And he tells her that she whom they call the Mad Virgin is a mystery. No one knows whence she came. No one knows who she is. She lives alone like the beasts of the fields among the hills. Woe be to the one whom she beckons with laughter. No man can resist her. She has the evil eye. And he goes on to tell her, 4 of our best men have been lost to her. Honest husbands, good fathers, all 4 of them. But they could not help themselves. She called, and they went to her.
Foreshadowing.
Well, and my question is, if the Mad Virgin of the Hills took them, were they good husbands and fathers?
Oh, but this is Italy, and this is a priest talking, so it's always the women's fault.
Right. Yes.
It's never cheating. No, it's because the wife did something wrong, or the woman who lured them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
It's great. I love our world we live in.
Keeping in mind that we were all very worried about Ferdinando and not concerned at all about Margarita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so our narrator and the priest kind of have a debate. Our narrator essentially says that she is shocked that the priest believes in what amounts to witchcraft. And the priest gives her an interesting lecture on the relative impossibility of anything.
Right. I mean, if you believe in Catholicism.
Well, and it's interesting because what he says is, it's impossible to speak together when you are absent, yet men talk with each other from all ends of the earth. It's impossible to see through a solid substance, yet men see through brick walls. It's impossible to have warmth and light without fire, yet the night is turned into day by electric light. It is impossible to live beneath the sea, yet men dive and live in submarines. It's impossible to fly without wings, yet men mount into the clouds like birds. And this jumped out at me because, we talked a bit in our episodes about the sort of turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s and how fairy tales became very popular. And it was in part a reaction to a lot of the technological innovations of the time. And that was dark, but kind of playful. They were, that's why the fairy tales kind of thing. This is the immediate aftermath of World War I.
was going to say 1919.
Yeah.
When it was written. Yeah. Wow.
And so I think it's the shocking speed of technological innovation. At the end of the 1800s, it's like, why not fairies? And now it's like, why not witches that want to eat me?
Right. It's nothing like war to make technological advances happen faster.
We just invented trench warfare. Why wouldn't the Mad Virgin of the Hills turn the men of our town into dogs?
Oh, and that's when they were doing a lot of new experimentation with false body parts and stuff. What is oh gosh. Prosthetics was the word I was looking for.
There we go. I could see you reaching for the word and my brain went blank as well. I was cool. I can't help you. You're on your own.
There's really cool sidebar. Go study post World War I art, because a lot of it is influenced by weird prosthetic stuff that they were experimenting in post trench warfare.
Oh,
it's very cool.
I didn't know that. In what way?
It's around the era of Dadaism, the absurdism, because everything was so horrible that they needed that outlet. But a lot of weird imagery of body parts and mechanisms that have been put into bodies to try to help people who came back from trench warfare with missing limbs. So a lot of the art is and there's a lot of sculptures and stuff using prosthetics and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Just fun sidebar for spooky season. It's a very interesting time in art history.
No, thank you for sharing.
Before the Nazis stole a lot of it.
Yeah. The Nazis just loved stealing things.
And destroying art.
Yeah, they were big fans.
Yeah. Anyway, back to hot witch lady turning men into dogs.
Yes, we love to see it. So the priest concludes, I have lived 70 years and I have learnt one lesson. Nothing is impossible. There is no limit to the power of Satan or of God. And so our narrator goes back to the hotel or house or whatever she's staying in. We don't get much detail. And she's standing on her balcony in the moonlight. And it says, I watched the impossible miracle of the setting moon renew itself over the enraptured hills. The priest was right. In that magic light, nothing was impossible. Phantoms from the archaic past, psychic emanations from the garish present, white ladies, pale Heinrichs, belles dames sans merci, vaporous undines passed in ghostly procession before me, filling the luminous void.
Oh, that was beautifully written.
It's a vibe, right? In the Italian moonlight, anything can happen.
Lovely.
And below her, she's at a bit of a distance, but she's on her balcony, and below her, the engagement party is happening. And she can see the dancers, and she can hear the music drifting up. And then the mad virgin appears. It says, against the ridge of the hills, I could see her slender figure and the forms of the 6 huge dogs, sharply outlined by the moonlight as distinctly as if it were day. Nearer she came and nearer, until, at last, I could discern her blue scarf floating behind her, and the wreath of roses on her head. In the light of the moon, the blood-red mouth, in its setting of shining pallor, took on a strange, unearthly look. Even so must the mouths of vampires, mystic destroyers of men, have looked. And she watches as the mad virgin, approaches the party, and finally, very cinematically, the music all stops at once.
Cool.
And
she likes an entrance. Her last entrance was also good.
She loves a dramatic... Well, if you're going to steal men and turn them into dogs as an example to other men...
you better make it look good.
You got to be a little camp about it, right? So, all of the onlookers huddle together. Ferdinando winds up alone in the crowd, and she comes up to him with her staff that's crowned in roses. And she says, "Oh ho, thou breaker of hearts, so thou dost dance at thy festa. Loose thou that child who is nothing to thee, and come and dance at mine." They stood and they looked at each other in the moonlight. What secret history of passion and sin lay between the two of them? Who shall say? Then she laughed softly. "Did I not tell thee when I called thee, thou wouldst come?" And Ferdinando responds, "I'll see thee damned for a witch before I come." And then he attacks her with a knife.
Ooh.
As Ferdinando hurled himself across the grass, the big dog standing beside her rose and launched himself at Ferdinando's throat. And
I was going to say, she's got guard dogs.
She's got many. She has 6 enormous dogs. And so this dog tackles Ferdinando. Not a soul stirred to help him. We all stood there breathless and watching. It was like a scene in a play. And she says, and this is my favorite, this is like the killer. This is the killer line. "Thou breaker of hearts, that was to be my master, come thou and be my dog."
Ooh.
And then she laughs again, calls her dogs, and walks away. And, as the darkness took her, Ferdinando dropped to his hands and knees and crawled up the white roadway on all 4s after her, with a hideous and incredible swiftness, barking like a dog.
Ooh, it's great imagery. There's something like always creepier about the imagery of like just a normal human, like not transformed, but doing something in that way.
Yeah, and like weirdly fast.
Yes.
Like the hideous and incredible swiftness. Like you can see it.
Yeah. That's actually very like more contemporary horror movie, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like quick,
It's funny to think that she was one of the first people to pivot from
film. Yeah, I see that. It already feels like she's ready.
She's set up for it.
That feels like a film to me.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Our narrator is unwilling to let this lie, and she imports an English doctor from Naples.
So she doesn't really care about him. She cares about Margarita.
I think, and it's hard to know how self-aware Alicia Ramsey was about the sort of foibles of the English, but I don't think she actually cares about any of them, really. I think she is a rich English lady.
It's something to do.
Who's just like playing with people's lives to entertain herself.
Okay. That's fun.
She's like, oh, turned into a dog, did he? Fascinating. Oh, Marguerite, I like you very much. Let's see you married. Oh, not the Mad Virgin.
Yeah, well, they didn't have TVs.
Heavens.
So this is the next best thing.
I mean, what do the English like more, especially
social drama
in this era, than just like showing up in other people's countries and playing with them like they're toys?
So true.
It's
While we're being racist, the English are colonialist pigs.
It's kind of their whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, look, bless them. I have family in England. I love them dearly. But historically...
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
Boy, howdy.
Hey, yeah.
Whew. Not that the Italians didn't also later pull off some of their own genocides.
We all have beautiful history of, imposing ourselves on other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big fun.
Whoopsie doodles.
Yeah. Okay, so Fernando is becoming a dog.
Fernando has scurried off into the woods and vanished.
Got it.
To go be a dog. And she, again,
do we know the narrator's name, or is she just a mysterious
No,
narrator? Okay,
she's
so
just
gotcha.
the nameless narrator.
I kind of like that because, not that this was intended this way, but because we know so little about the author, it's like a mirror to the mysterious author.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. And so, because obviously no Italian has ever been clever enough to be a doctor, she brings in an English doctor from Naples, because obviously he'll be a voice of reason.
Yeah. The English sensibility.
And the doctor and the priest get together. Apparently Italian priests are up to snuff, just not Italian doctors.
Yeah.
And the doctor and the priest agree that Ferdinando is under some kind of delusion, and that if he can be removed from the Mad Virgin, that he will remember he's a man. But if he doesn't, he's going to eventually die of exhaustion from running around like a dog.
That's the explanation we're going with.
Yep.
Cool. I thought we said the priest believes in this stuff.
He does?
Okay.
It's a little unclear.
Okay, it's cool. Let's keep going.
It's a little unclear. It says, the doctor and the priest were quite at one in their view of the matter. It was strange to see the two of them, the one so young, the other so old. The one a man of science, the other a man of faith. The one a teacher of all things supernatural, and the other a frank disbeliever, whose life was founded on fact, joining issue in this way. On the third morning, as I was sitting with the young doctor and the old priest, the door opened softly, and the little Margarita came in. She put her hand inside her chemisette and drew out a blood-stained knife. She'll not laugh any more and turn men into dogs. I found her sleeping, and I killed her. Let them take me to prison and do as they will with me. Ferdinando is free.
Wow, unexpected.
Right?
Cool.
So Margarita faints. She
had the gall to go murder a lady and save her man, but then the realization of it was too much for her.
I guess so. She puts the bloodstained knife on the table and she just faints.
Okay.
And the priest picks her up and takes her away to her grandmother's house. But before he leaves, he looks at our narrator and the doctor and he says, "My good friends, there are rooms which have no ears, though they are not confessionals. And there are good friends who have not tongues, though they are not priests." He carried the little Margarita away to her grandmother, and the doctor hurried away to find his patient. I stood alone and looked at the knife lying on the table. The scarlet of its shining reminded me of the roses in her hair.
It's a good line about the loose lips.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's pretty much it.
That's a story? I forgot it was a short story.
It's almost over.
Wow.
So It says, the same day, Ferdinando recovered his senses, and in the course of a few days was restored to his normal health. Later, when the gossip had ceased and the red roses were all gone, he married the little Margarita. I gave the bride away and danced at their festa. I hear Ferdinando makes a model husband. They have 10 cows and 20 pigs, and Margarita puts out her own washing. So I gather they are very prosperous and divinely happy. Their eldest little girl is named for me, and Ferdinando invariably ends his letters by anxious inquiries as to my views about her future dowry.
Like hinting that she'll pay for it.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Yeah. He's like,
You remember last time when I wanted money and you gave it to me? Mommy?
remember the last time you made sure I didn't have to fulfill any responsibility for myself and you just showed up and paid for me to marry somebody?
Yeah.
And here's how the story closes. I suppose if you come down to hard, plain facts, I really connived at a murder, for Margarita was never punished. Imagine if it had been England. The police, the jury, the judge, the whole paraphernalia of the law put into motion to avenge outraged civilization. But southern Italy is not England, fortunately for the little Margarita. The taking and giving of life is a different thing among the primitive races from what it is with us. Sorry.
I was going to say, even the fact that it's southern Italy, like, not only to this day is there, I don't know if it's right to call it racism, but there is
Ethnocentrism,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
I mean, and especially in Europe, a derogatory view towards the more tan Europeans, which is so silly. But even like in my own family, like my grandmother's family was Southern Italian and my grandfather's was Northern Italian, and they clashed because of that level of
Well, sure.
the racism within that.
Yeah, it's your, what is it? Your butter Italians and your olive oil
Yes,
Italians.
yes. It's the
If you can't agree on something as simple as the fat to lubricate your pans,
right, it's the Alfredo versus marinara. Yeah,
there's going to be bloodshed. Yeah, I guess I should call it intra-European bigotry.
yeah. I just compared to like actual.
But the reason I call it intra-European racism is because in the era when these things are happening, they did consider them different races.
Sure. I mean, even my father was born in 1950. There was a lot of slurs towards Italians in this country, and he dealt with a lot of the,
I feel like it's a useful reminder of the extent to which whiteness is purely an invention.
Sure.
Because at this point,
Yeah.
she's like, yes, those Italians who are definitely a different race than me.
She relates them to animals. So
The English
yeah,
lady.
Yeah. Classic.
Classic English lady. And it says, no one will believe this story, but it is true all the same. If you don't believe me, go to Firenze, that little village tucked away in the hills in the south of Italy, and ask the sacristan of the little church in the square to show you the new statue of the Virgin, with the marble dog lying at her feet. Ferdinando carved it as a thank offering. It is said to be a modern masterpiece. That all happened more years ago than I care to remember, but I have forgotten nothing. Even as I write these words, I can see the Mad Virgin's white face framed in the moonlight, and the red roses on her golden head turned to fire. Across the silence of the years, I thrill again as I hear her laugh.
Spooky.
The end.
Well, I'm conflicted because I was rooting for the Mad Virgin Witch. I don't like, as an artist, that Ferdinando ends up apparently being a skilled artist because I just want to hate him.
Well, so it's, and I might have accidentally hopped over this because it's...
Oh, because he was a stonemason.
He was a stonemason.
I do remember. Okay.
And so he's sort of... Ferdinando has returned to the ways of his forefathers, right? It's the final repudiation of his wandering ways.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone back to good, honest stonemasonry.
With his murderer wife.
And he's made a good husband to her, and
Sure.
he's been frightened into behaving.
I mean, yeah. Margarita also seems like a badass in this story.
I mean, if your wife murdered a possibly paranormal woods witch,
You'd probably stay in line.
I would.
Italian women are already scary.
Just be like, yes, dear, whatever you need, dear.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Wow.
So what do we think? What are our thoughts?
I'm trying to place it in the context. I know we don't know a lot about the author, but post-World War I, from what I've read, because I was not there, seems like a time that was interesting for women because during the war, they were given more power and freedom than they normally had because they were the people left behind and someone needed to run society. And,
and it's
then,
funny how that happens.
Right. And then when the men came back, it was like, go back to your lady work. But at that point, it's like you've already felt what it feels like to be more than that. So it's interesting in that context that the author would write a book where the most powerful people in the short story are the two women, Margarita and the witch.
The three women, really.
The narrator. Oh, yeah, because the narrator's rich. She has the money power.
Yeah.
Margarita is cool murderer lady, so she's got the physical power.
And who is supposed to get Ferdinando into heaven.
Well,
theoretically.
Sure. Yes, she has that power. And just the fact that, she shipped in the male doctor and they had the male priest and they were supposed to solve the problem. And then Margarita just went out and solved it herself.
Indeed.
Pretty badass. And then the witch herself, who has already turned supposedly 6 men into dogs, and also just, even if you don't believe in the mystical part of this, is a woman who lives by herself, living an independent life. In 1919, Italy is already.
Yeah. Just hanging out in the woods with a bunch of beasts.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We like the fantasizing of lady power.
Yeah, everyone is making decisions about Ferdinando's life except for Ferdinando all of a sudden.
Right.
Which is clearly novel for him.
Which is a nice, I'm not going to say reprimand, but he's probably ruined a lot of women's lives if he's led them on in love and then left them high and dry.
Yeah.
So, serves him right.
But it is interesting, kind of on the flip side, that Margarita's triumph is in killing another woman who represents a sort of quasi-divine punishment. It's like the triumph of normalcy.
Right. Which is why I said immediately that I was feeling conflicted.
Yeah, like, because she's basically reasserting her own oppression in a way.
Right.
Like, she could have stood there and just been like, oh, fuck. All right. Like, maybe I don't like him as much as I thought I did.
Right.
Maybe she can have him.
That's not very Italian, though. She was like, that's my man. Where's my knife? Trying to decide how much to share about my own Italian grandmother, who my parents pulled a knife out of her hand, aimed at my grandfather.
Ooh, did he deserve it?
Oh yeah, he cheated on her for years. So
good for her.
Yeah. Love you, Grandma Betty.
Look, sometimes a man needs stabbing. It's spooky season. What are we here for if not turning men into dogs?
Yeah.
And maybe wielding knives occasionally.
I love it. I also personally, I love reading in general and I'm a huge just fan of lots of different types of literature, but I love short stories.
Yeah.
I feel like a really good short story leaves you feeling an ambiguity, makes you feel a little uncomfortable and also like, what?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you jumped on very early in this narrative is that our narrator is clearly entranced by the Mad Virgin in the woods in a way that borders on feeling like, at a minimum, some kind of...
It doesn't necessarily have to be sexual romantic attraction, but there is physical attraction. She's attracted to...
Yes. And it's...
drawn in.
I think it feels like a very complex attraction. The way that she keeps lingering on even I, a woman, found her voice, incredibly arresting.
Right.
And it's just like, okay.
And the amount of visual imagery used to describe the sunlight behind her and the roses and her bloodied lips and... Well,
and she's a inverted Madonna, right?
Right.
She's
the flowers in the hair
and the blue veil.
Right.
She is a Madonna.
And the Virgin, yeah. They keep calling her that.
And so she's a sort of, the the Virgin stands for many, many things in Catholicism.
Sure.
But she's very much considered like a protector of women, a protector of mothers.
Which is why it's so interesting that Margarita is the one to go kill her.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to, what is the author trying to get at here? Because, you know, especially as someone who just rewatched Jennifer's Body, I was really rooting for the witch to just kill him.
Yeah. Well, and so to complicate it even further, when this story was written, things in Italy were really weird.
Right.
Politically, things in Italy were like really weird.
Yeah.
And very chaotic. And this would have all been in the press. Like this being published in December of 1919 would kind of be the equivalent of publishing a short story that just kind of happened to be set in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right after Russia invaded them.
Right.
It's a huge international story that would 100% be in the news. And if it is a coincidence, it's a very interesting coincidence because I don't know how familiar you are with like immediate post-World War I Italian politics. NBD if you're not.
I know more about the art than the politics. But.
So Italy, as I'm sure you know, Italy fought on the side of the Allies. And at the end of World War I, when Britain and France and America are divvying things up.
Divvying up the land. That went so well, yes.
Yes, the divvying that definitely did not have any long-term complications. Italy had been promised certain territories that they ultimately were not given. So Italy left World War I feeling cheated.
Yeah.
And in the immediate aftermath of this, there was a sort of warrior poet
Interesting.
named
I feel like those things don't often go together.
Gabriel D'Annunzio.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of him?
I have not.
So he was a famous poet and sort of national hero even before the war.
Okay.
In the war, he became a fighter pilot. He was a very big deal. And after the war, he became briefly this kind of charismatic, we're talking like this is very early kind of proto-fascism.
Oh.
So he became, over the course of the war, he became a hardcore Italian ethno-nationalist.
Right.
It's a little complicated. You can make a very strong argument that he was kind of the grandfather of Italian fascism.
Sure.
Some
or at
peop-
least help the flames of that. Yeah.
No, like really like kind of came up with some of the things that
okay.
became
No,
Italian
all right.
fascism.
Gotcha.
There's a Behind the Bastards like 2-part series on it,
Like
he explains it much better than I do.
Okay.
So go listen to that if
All
you
right.
want more on this. But the fact is that a few months before this story is published, D'Annunzio and a bunch of his supporters went and occupied a city that they believed should have been annexed to Italy.
Oh, something that they felt owed.
And briefly launched a weird militaristic mini country kingdom occupation thing.
I'm sure that was great for the people who actually lived there.
I'm sure they loved it. Yeah. It was the Italian Regency of Carnaro, and they established it via a coup d'etat in September of 1919.
So 2 months before this book was released.
2 months,
Or story.
2 months before the story was published. And that's very close for those two things to be directly related, but there was a lot of stuff leading up to that. And he was a arguably like very famous figure.
Okay.
And I do think that in light of everything that was happening in Italy, there is a perspective on this story where she is using Fernando as kind of a stand-in for Italy itself and for even arguably, possibly even a stand-in for D'Annunzio,
Okay.
depending on how much she was paying attention to the news. Because Ferdinando is described over and over again as being kind of poetic, you know?
He's romanticized for sure.
But he's also a disappointment to his father,
Yeah.
and he's one of the notes that it says is when he comes back, he sells his father's vineyard, right? He's separated himself from the ways of his forefathers in a very serious way. He's cut himself loose, and he is living for himself. He's all impulse and greed and is nonetheless confident that, when he's ready, when he's gotten everything he wants, he'll settle down and
he'll use a woman for money and to get into heaven.
And Margarita will get him into heaven with the strength of her prayers. And
the real horror story.
But I think it's interesting to think of this story as possibly being a little bit of a parable about Italian nationalism and Ramsey kind of trying to make a statement about Italy needing to...
Wait, is the author English?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, totally. She's like, they need me and my money and, and my sensibility.
Well, I think there's an extent to which, it's like, be happy with what you get.
Right. Be
happy with what you're given.
Because in the end, he's not killed. He's put in a submissive place of be a good husband.
And listen to the good and peace-loving women of Italy, right? Because that is a very sort of standard idea in the era of like women are the ones who are sort of natural pacifists. Mm-hmm. It's like listen to the women. Go home to the homestead.
Right. Well, in fairness, when we were talking about that guy like starting his like taking the land and starting their own little pseudo country, I was like, women would never do that. Men are so annoying. But yes, yeah, in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting, I think it's there. I think the case can be made.
No, I can see that too. I mean.
But if that's the case, then what is the Mad Virgin?
I know.
Is she war? Is she conquest?
So, okay. So we have Ferdinando as the symbol potentially of like Italian nationalism, fascism.
Italy writ large, possibly.
In general. Yeah. And then we have the Mad Virgin Witch, which originally I was thinking of as the symbol of this newly found independence in women in general. Because especially at that century, I mean, like, there's no way, especially in Italy. Yeah. She's not voting or owning land and stuff.
No. It could be both, right?
It could be both.
Because she could be war, conquest, with her bloody mouth.
Subjugation.
And her crown of roses. Sure. Turning men into beasts.
I don't know. You're the smart one. You tell me.
Well, to be clear, like, I don't have anything.
We don't have answers because the author's a little.
Yeah, this is just chat. Yeah. This is speculative chat.
It's just an interesting story because it doesn't follow the normal lines or arcs of like I was actually shocked that Margarita just went out and killed him.
So was I.
Yeah. I wasn't ready for that.
And that's part of what made me want to be like, what else could be going on in this story?
Right.
Because the Mad Virgin is such a seductive figure. Right. And she's such a...
And to not even like, it doesn't even give her like an amazing death scene. It's just, I just went out and killed her.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I mean, one of the other questions is like, did Margarita kill her?
Oh, true. They could have conspired.
Or maybe Margarita thinks she killed her.
Right. Oh, we're thinking mystical. She's a witch. She could have escaped that.
Possibly.
This is the beauty and joy of short stories. It's always ambiguous.
Yeah. Margarita could think that she killed the witch, and maybe she didn't, and the Mad Virgin just gave Ferdinando back and was like, all right,
She was like, that was a tough broad. She can give him more hell than I can.
Like, well, and he's learned his lesson now.
Yeah, totally. And now he'll be a good husband.
Yeah. If it weren't for the fact that we see them in scene together, I'd be like, was Margarita the Mad Virgin the whole time?
Yeah. Well, that was a fun story.
Yeah.
Is the whole book written by her and that's just a story in it? The book you're holding? Or...
No. So this is a collection of short stories from one of my favorite imprints. The British Library does all of these collections of short stories that are drawn from their archives. And this one is called Queens of the Abyss, Lost Stories from the Women of the Weird.
Cool.
And it is all short stories by women from, I think, the sort of late 1800s up through the 1930s. I think the last one goes as late as like 52. and it's edited by Mike Ashley. It's very, very good. I highly recommend it. All their collections of short stories are amazing.
Awesome. I was just curious because I feel like in order to build context in this story, it'd be nice to know anything else about like what other works the author created. But I like that we're guessing.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta stick with the text,
Yeah.
you know?
Let
The
the-
death of the author.
Yes, let the art speak for itself.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to let the mad virgin take the author away into the woods and turn them into a dog.
Yes.
So that you can just focus on the text as text.
Yeah.
Especially at spooky season, I think.
Yes.
Just take the horror narrative on its face.
Just enjoy the gleaming scarlet of the knife.
Yeah. And maybe think about Italian fascism. I think, and I know that this is a phrase I say a lot, but like, there's a lot going on here. You could take this story in a bunch of different directions.
Oh, I was thinking about something you said in a different episode about thinking about the happiest character. And I'm like, is it Margarita? She just got money and a husband who's dutiful. You know, all she had to do was kill a witch.
Yeah, all she had to do was stab it. Well, and I think our narrator's made it off scot-free, but our narrator's
true.
also a narrator.
Yeah.
Here's the question. Do we think Ferdinando is happy?
That's a good question. It's like on surface level, you think he would be because he's got, you know, a steady life and kids and stuff. But I also genuinely feel like if this hadn't happened, he definitely would have been like cheating on her a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, at the end of the day, I suppose, if you take the narrator at her word that Margarita and Ferdinando are both divinely happy,
Sure.
I think is the phrase she uses, then Ferdinando really lucked out in being shown the error of his ways in
Right.
a non-negotiable fashion.
yeah. It's just interesting, too, especially for the time period, the portrayal of a relationship that did give the power to the woman in that way. 'Cause that's, like,
Yeah.
you know, was not really a thing, especially in Italy.
Well, and from what little I know about her, Alicia Ramsey was not exactly a wilting violet.
Mm-hmm.
She married twice. Both of her husbands were also like writers and actors. She was very involved in like the theater scene. She was writing plays. She was writing movies. Like they had a grand old time, her and her husbands.
Cool.
And they were collaborators, which is good, you know, working together.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
who is going to dress up as the Mad Virgin for Halloween?
it's a great costume. I'm already thinking about the drawing.
I just need a blue scarf with gold stars on it.
Yeah, and some roses for your hair, and then like 6. I'm imagining like Beanie Baby dogs, but you know, just like various stuffed animal dogs around you.
No, you need 6 men dressed
Just
as
as dogs. That's so much better. Oh my God. Who volunteers as tribute? If you're listening and you're a man and you want to be one of our dogs for Halloween, please reach out.
The first person who sends me a picture of themselves and their friends dressed up as the Mad Virgin and dogs, I will have them on the show as a guest.
Yes.
Done.
I'll draw you. There you go.
There
You're
we go.
immortalized.
All right. Well, and any final thoughts on?
I mean, honestly, I want to read it because the actual parts that you read sound very well written, and you can tell that she's moving towards, like, it makes sense that she would end up in film because she's clearly very drawn to like the aesthetics of it all.
Yeah, it's beautifully written.
Yeah, but yeah, no more thoughts. I was rooting for the witch lady. Sad she died, but did she?
I'm choosing to believe that she is not dead.
Yeah.
She let Margarita think that she died, and then she moved on to terrorize the men in a different town.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's the sequel.
Team Mad Virgin of the Hills.
I'm always team witch lady who's killing men or turning them into pigs or dogs.
Yeah. Well, Jessica,
Grace.
if people want to find you and your amazing art, where do they go?
Well, for the rest of the month, I will not be found because I will be in my studio hiding and working. But you
That
can
is fair.
find my art at rapid.eyes on Instagram, which is where I do most things. I also have a website and all the other stuff. I haven't been on those things in a while, so.
That's fair. Well, you make very good art. I have several pieces of it hanging up in my house, and I acquire more like once, I don't know, like once a year or so, I just get a new piece and stick it somewhere else in my house. It's great.
Collecting. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And the next one will be of the Mad Virgin Witch and her
yes.
dogs.
Please.
And if you want to be that witch and model for this drawing, send us photos.
Yes. Please.
Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Well, go buy Jessica's art. It's very good. It's got a lot of sort of monstrous and complicated and very thought-provoking angles of femininity, much like this story.
Yes, it's all tied together.
And, just a reminder that we have merch if you'd like to help me keep making the show. If you go find us on TeePublic, we have mugs, shirts, magnets, pins, all kinds of things.
Get your tchotchkes.
Yeah, get your tchotchkes. Yeah, we will be back soon with more spookiness, probably. And I think that about does us.
Happy haunting season.
Happy haunting season. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author or artist, because they could really use the love. Bye.
Bye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, recorded, and edited by me, Grace Todd. You can follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at Didn't Read It.
Our theme song is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton.
For sources cited and a full list of episodes, you can visit us at didntreaditpod.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review. It makes a big difference, and we appreciate it immensely.
If you did not enjoy the show, we are accepting applications for a full-time nemesis at didntreaditpod@gmail.com. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia, and to Pesca Trio Publishing.